A millionaire invited a street boy to a luxury party to humiliate him. Hours later, everyone was speechless when the boy called one of the guests Daddier. The scorching sun punished the city streets, turning the asphalt into a furnace that made the air tremble. Luke, a boy of only 12 years old, walked with his head down along the sidewalk, his watchful eyes scanning every corner in search of something that could alleviate his hunger. His dark, unkempt hair clung to his sweaty forehead, and his tattered clothes barely covered his thin, dirty body. "There has to be something around here for me to eat. I can't go another day without eating again. I don't know if my body will take it," he muttered to himself, his voice hoarse from thirst and hunger. As he turned a corner, Luke caught sight of a row of trash cans in front of a restaurant. His heart raced at the possibility of finding leftover food still edible. Looking around to make sure no one was watching, he stealthily approached the first trash can. With trembling hands, Luke lifted the lid, the nauseating smell causing his stomach to churn. But hunger was stronger than disgust, and he began to rummage through the putrid contents. "Hey, kid, get away from the door of my restaurant. You're scaring off my customers with that stench of yours," shouted a gruff voice behind him. Luke turned around, startled, facing a burly man in a dirty apron. The boy backed away, tripping over his own feet. Sorry, sir. I was just looking for something to eat. It's been days since I've eaten anything." "Don't you have any leftover food at your restaurant?" "No, this is not a place for charity. I have nothing to do with your problems. I don't want to know. Just don't bother my customers," the man interrupted, advancing in a threatening manner. "Get out of here before I call the police!" Luke didn't wait for a second warning. He turned and ran as fast as his weak legs would allow, his heart pounding erratically in his chest. Tears of frustration and fear began to form in his eyes. "Why does no one ever help me?" he thought, swallowing a sob. "I just wanted a little food, even leftovers would do. Is that too much to ask?" After a few blocks, Luke stopped to catch his breath, leaning against the wall of an abandoned building. His stomach growled painfully, reminding him that he hadn't eaten anything since the day before. Looking around, his eyes fell on an elderly lady slowly walking along the opposite sidewalk, carrying a grocery bag. For a moment, Luke considered the idea of trying to steal the bag, but guilt consumed him before he even took a step. "I can't do that," he muttered to himself, squeezing his eyes shut tightly. "Mum would be so disappointed if she saw me stealing. She always said honesty was more important than anything." The memory of his mother brought a new wave of pain. How long had it been since he'd seen her? Months and years blurred together in his memory, making it impossible to determine exactly when he had lost her. "Mum, where are you? Why did you leave me alone?" Luke whispered, feeling tears stream down his dirty cheeks. Gathering his last reserves of strength, Luke continued his walk. The sun was already starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange that cruelly contrasted with the misery around him. As he passed a store window, Luke glimpsed his reflection and barely recognized himself. The once chubby, cheerful face was now gaunt and haggard, with deep circles under eyes that seemed to have lost all their sparkle. "Is this how I'm going to die? Alone and hungry on the streets? Will anyone miss me?" he asked himself, his voice choked. At that moment, a familiar noise caught his attention. Turning around, Luke saw a scrawny stray cat sniffing an overturned trash can. For an instant, he felt a connection with the animal, both struggling to survive in a world that didn't seem to care. Approaching the cat cautiously, Luke extended his hand. "Hey, buddy, you're hungry too, huh? At least there are two of us in this misery." The cat recoiled, distrustful, but didn't run away. Luke sat down on the curb, watching the animal. "At least you don't have to worry about finding a place to sleep, huh? It must be nice to be a cat. No one expects anything from you." As he talked to his new friend, Luke heard the sound of tires gently braking nearby. Turning around, he saw a luxurious car pull up beside him. The driver's window began to slowly roll down. Luke's heart raced. He had heard stories of street children being taken by strangers in fancy cars, never to be seen again. He stood up quickly, ready to run. Is it the police? And he thought, feeling panic rising in his chest. Or worse, is it one of those bad men we hear about? The window finished rolling down, revealing a middle-aged man with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Luke froze, torn between fear and curiosity, his eyes fixed on the luxurious interior of the car, so different from anything he knew. "What does he want with me?" Should I run or stay? Luke wondered, feeling his legs tremble. The man in the car leaned slightly out of the window, his eyes scanning Luke from head to toe. The boy felt exposed, vulnerable, as if that gaze could see through his tattered clothes and straight into his starving, desperate soul. "Hey, boy," the man called, his voice smooth, but with an undertone Luke couldn't decipher. "Are you lost?" Luke swallowed hard, his throat suddenly as dry as paper. He looked around for an escape route, but his feet seemed glued to the ground. But he was alone. He would have to face whatever was coming without any help. What should I do? Run? Respond? What if he can help me? What if he's dangerous? Thought Luke, his heart beating so hard it felt like it would explode in his chest. The man in the car, Mr. Matthew, watched Luke with a calculating look, his eyes shining with a mixture of amusement and barely concealed malice. He adjusted his silk tie, a gesture that contrasted sharply with the rags Luke wore. The boy remained paralyzed, torn between fear and the curiosity the luxurious car aroused. "Don't be afraid, boy," said Mr. Matthew, his mellifluous voice hiding his true intentions. "I'm here to help. What's your name?" Luke hesitated, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. My name is Luke," he finally answered, his voice almost a whisper. "But I'm not lost, sir. I live. Around here." Mr. Matthew laughed, a sound that made Luke instinctively flinch. "You live around here in the streets? A smart boy like you deserves better, don't you think?" As he spoke, Mr. Matthew thought to himself, "Perfect. This dirty, starving brat will be the main attraction at my party. I can't wait to see the look on my guests' faces." Luke took a hesitant step towards the car, drawn by the air conditioning escaping through the open window. The smell of leather and expensive perfume invaded his nostrils, so different from the odor of garbage and sweat he was accustomed to. You want to help me?" Luke asked, hope struggling against fear in his voice. "How, Mr.?" Matthew opened a wide smile, revealing perfectly white teeth. "I'm throwing a party at my mansion, Luke. A grand party with lots of food, music, and important people. Would you like to be my special guest?" Luke's eyes widened at the word food. His stomach audibly growled, reminding him of his desperate hunger. A party? With real food? "More food than you've ever seen in your life, my boy," replied Mr. Matthew, savoring the hungry expression on the boy's face. "Lobster, caviar, champagne, all the best and most expensive." As he spoke, Mr. Matthew imagined the scene, Luke clumsy and dirty, trying to mingle with the city's elite. The laughter, the looks of disdain, the complete humiliation of the boy. It would be the perfect entertainment for his bored guests. Luke swallowed hard, feeling his mouth water at the mention of so much food, but a voice in his head warned him of the danger. "Why are you inviting me? I'm nobody important." "Mr." Matthew leaned further out the window, his smile now almost predatory. "Ah, but you are important, Luke. You will be my guest of honor. Everyone will be fascinated by your story." "My story?" Luke asked, confused. "But I don't have any interesting story to tell." "Leave that to me," replied Mr. Matthew, laughing inwardly. "I'm sure we'll find something captivating to share." Luke looked around as if searching for someone who could advise him. But the street was deserted, except for a few papers being carried by the breeze. He was alone in this decision. "I don't know, sir," said Luke, his voice trembling slightly. "My mother always told me not to trust strangers." "Mr." Matthew felt a twinge of irritation, but kept the smile on his face. "Your mother is a wise woman, Luke, but where is she now? I don't see her around to take care of you." The words hit Luke like a punch to the stomach. Tears began to form in his eyes. She... I got lost from her. I don't know where she is," the boy answered. "Oh, what a pity. Then all the more reason to come with me. I can take care of you, if only for this one night," said Mr. Matthew, feigning sympathy while savoring the boy's despair. Luke felt the weight of loneliness more than ever. Mr. Matthew's offer, as suspicious as it was the first display of kindness he had received in weeks. "And if I go and don't like it?" Luke asked, his voice small and insecure. Can I leave whenever I want? Mr. Matthew nodded emphatically, though in his mind he was already planning how to keep the boy at the party for as long as he wanted. Of course, my boy. You will be our guest, not our prisoner, argued the millionaire with a mischievous tone. Luke took another step towards the car, drawn by the promise of food and shelter. But something in Mr. Matthew's gaze made him hesitate. What will happen at the party? Luke asked, trying to gain more information before making his decision. Mr. Matthew laughed, a sound that didn't reach his cold eyes. Well, it will be a magical night. You'll meet fascinating people, eat the best delicacies, and who knows, maybe even find someone who can help you in the long run. As he spoke, Mr. Matthew imagined the looks of disgust his guests would cast at Luke, the invasive and humiliating questions they would ask, the spectacle of misery the boy would provide. Luke felt a shiver run down his spine, as if he could sense Mr. Matthew's dark thoughts. But hunger and despair spoke louder, so the boy pondered for a moment, weighing his fears against the prospect of a night of comfort and plenty. His stomach growled again, as if giving its opinion on the matter. I think I can go, but can I really leave if I want to? Luke finally said, his voice a mixture of fear and hope. Mr. Matthew smiled triumphantly, savoring his victory. But of course, my boy. Now, why don't you get in? The air conditioning is on and I'm sure you'll appreciate the comfort. With his heart pounding, Luke took the final steps towards the car. The door opened as if by magic, revealing a luxurious interior that seemed to come from another world. Come on, Luke. A night of adventure awaits, encouraged Mr. Matthew, his voice now almost hypnotic. Luke hesitated one last time, looking at the empty street behind him. It was his last chance to give up, to return to the familiar world no matter how harsh it was. It's okay, it's just one night. What could go wrong? He said to himself, gathering courage. With one last trembling sigh, Luke entered the car. The door closed behind him with a soft click, sealing his fate. The vehicle pulled away smoothly, taking him away from the only life he knew. Luke settled into the soft leather seat, his wide eyes roaming the luxurious interior of the car. The scent of new leather and an expensive perfume invaded his nostrils, so different from the smells he was used to on the streets. His dirty hands hesitated before touching anything, fearing to tarnish the perfection around him. Mr. Matthew watched the boy through the rearview mirror, an enigmatic smile playing on his lips. Comfortable, Luke. This is just a taste of what's to come, said Mr. Matthew, his voice smooth as velvet. Luke swallowed hard, nodding slightly. It's so soft. I've never been in a car like this, he whispered, more to himself than to the man. The driver, a burly man with a stern expression, started the engine. The soft purr of the luxury car was almost imperceptible. Luke flinched as he heard the click of the doors locking automatically. His heart raced, a wave of panic threatening to engulf him. Why? Why did you lock the doors? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. Mr. Matthew laughed, a sound that didn't reach his cold eyes. It's just a safety mechanism, my young one. Don't worry, you're perfectly safe here. Luke nodded nervously. The car glided smoothly through the city streets, leaving behind the rundown neighborhood where Luke lived. The boy looked out the window, seeing his familiar world disappear and be replaced by wide avenues and imposing buildings. The change of scenery was so drastic, it seemed he was entering another universe. Where are we going exactly? Luke asked, trying to keep his voice steady. To my residence. It's a bit out of the city center. You'll love it, I'm sure, Mr. Matthew replied with a smile Luke couldn't decipher. Luke felt a knot in his stomach. How far away, and what if I want to go back? He thought, fear growing in his chest. There was something in the millionaire's gaze that frightened the boy, yet he decided to continue the journey. I have to believe in people's kindness. I'm just not used to people as kind as Mr. Matthew, he thought. As they progressed, the buildings gave way to enormous houses and spacious estates. Luke pressed his face against the glass, marveled at the well-tended gardens and mansions that looked like they came straight out of a movie. His reflection in the glass painfully reminded him of his own ragged appearance. I don't belong here. Did I stain the car with my clothes? He muttered softly, feeling smaller and smaller. Mr. Matthew noticed the boy's discomfort and decided to break the silence. You know, Luke, I wasn't always rich. I started from the bottom just like you. The boy turned, surprised by the revelation. Really, sir? How did you manage all this? The millionaire let out a short laugh. With a lot of hard work, determination and, let's say, some difficult decisions. His eyes gleamed in a way that made Luke instinctively shrink back. But enough about me. Tell me more about yourself. How did you end up on the streets? Luke hesitated, feeling the weight of the memories he tried to forget. I got lost. My mother. She... His voice failed, and he swallowed the lump forming in his throat. Mr. Matthew feigned a sympathetic expression. How sad. It must have been very hard for you. The boy merely nodded, unable to continue. Mr. Matthew smiled inwardly, thinking about how this story of abandonment would be perfect to entertain his guests. Well, who knows? Maybe tonight will be a fresh start for you, Luke. Finally, the car came to a stop in front of an imposing gate. Luke felt his breath catch as he saw the extent of the property that lay before him. A tree-lined avenue led to a mansion that seemed more like a palace. "Welcome to my home, Luke," announced Mr. Matthew with an exaggerated flourish. The boy could only nod, unable to form words. The gate opened silently and the car advanced along the avenue. Luke felt as if he were entering a fortress. The knot in his stomach tightened. "Aren't I too simple a boy to enter a place as beautiful as this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Matthew turned, his eyes meeting Luke's in the rearview mirror. "What are you talking about? You came to have fun, and the fun has barely begun, my young one. Relax and enjoy." He paused, studying the boy's frightened expression. "Remember, Luke, opportunities like this don't come twice in a lifetime," he argued. The car rounded a majestic fountain before stopping in front of the main entrance to the mansion. Luke heard the sound of the locks being released and for a brief moment considered opening the door and running. But where to? He was in an unknown place, without money, without direction. "Come on, Luke, an unforgettable night awaits," called Mr. Matthew, already out of the car and climbing the entrance steps. His tone was inviting, but there was something in his eyes that made Luke shudder. With trembling legs, the boy got out of the car, feeling tiny before the grandeur of the mansion. The fresh night air hit his face, carrying the scent of exotic flowers that adorned the garden. For a moment, Luke closed his eyes, absorbing the apparent peace of the place. Impressive, isn't it? Wait until you see the inside. "I'm sure you've never seen anything like it." Mr. Matthew's voice brought him back to reality. Luke nodded silently, his eyes roaming over the imposing facade of the mansion. Marble columns, huge windows, gold details, everything screamed wealth and power. "It's like a castle," he muttered, more to himself than to Mr. Matthew. The millionaire laughed, placing a hand on Luke's shoulder. The touch made the boy flinch instinctively. "Oh, this is nothing compared to what you'll see inside. Come, we need to get ready. The guests will arrive soon and can't be kept waiting." The mansion doors opened, revealing an entrance hall that took Luke's breath away. Crystal chandeliers, artworks that looked worth millions, furniture the boy was afraid to even look at. It was a completely alien world for someone who had spent the last month sleeping in alleys and feeding on scraps. "Welcome to your new world, Luke. Are you ready for the night of your life?" said Mr. Matthew, his smile now wider than ever. Luke swallowed hard, feeling the weight of that question. There was no turning back now. Whatever awaited him beyond those doors, he would have to face it. With one last trembling sigh, the boy followed Mr. Matthew into the mansion, the doors closing behind them with a definitive sound. Luke followed Mr. Matthew down the mansion's luxurious hallway, his wide eyes absorbing every detail of the opulent surroundings. The millionaire strode with firm steps, occasionally glancing back to make sure the boy was keeping up. They stopped before an ornate door, and Mr. Matthew opened it with a flourish. "This will be your room for tonight, Luke. I hope it meets your expectations," he announced, gesturing for the boy to enter. Luke entered hesitantly, marveled by the room's size and elegance. It was larger than anywhere he had ever slept, with a king-size bed, silk curtains, and a breathtaking view of the gardens. His feet sank into the plush carpet, and he was afraid to soil it with his worn shoes. It's beautiful. I've never seen anything like this, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Matthew smiled, his eyes gleaming with a satisfaction Luke didn't fully comprehend. The millionaire moved to an imposing wardrobe and opened it, revealing an array of elegant clothes. Of course you haven't. Well, I've selected some pieces for you, my boy, he said, pulling out a black suit from the hanger. We can't have you attending the party in these ragged, dirty clothes, can we? Luke looked at his tattered attire, feeling a pang of shame. You didn't have to go through the trouble. I don't know if... The boy began, but the millionaire cut him off. Nonsense, you'll be the guest of honor. You need to be dressed appropriately, Mr. Matthew interrupted, thrusting the suit into Luke's hands. With trembling hands, Luke accepted the clothes, feeling the fine fabric between his calloused fingers. Mr. Matthew pointed to an adjacent door. The bathroom is right there. Take a shower and get changed. We don't want you soiling the mansion with your old clothes. One of the staff will come to fetch you when it's time to come down. Before Luke could respond, Mr. Matthew had already left the room, closing the door behind him. The boy stood for a moment, feeling small and out of place amidst such luxury. Is this real, or will I wake up back on the streets at any moment? He thought to himself. Gathering courage, Luke made his way to the bathroom. The sight that greeted him left him gaping. A huge bathtub, a shower with jets on all sides, golden faucets. He hesitated before removing his filthy clothes, fearing staining something with his grime, as Mr. Matthew had said. The bath was an almost religious experience for Luke. The hot water, the scented soap, the soft towels, everything was so different from his reality on the streets. As he washed himself, he couldn't help but think about how his life had changed so drastically in just a few hours. Maybe Mr. Matthew is an angel. Maybe he really does want to help me, he murmured to himself, scrubbing years of dirt off his skin. Dressing in the suit proved to be a challenge. Luke had never worn anything so elegant and complex. He struggled with the buttons, adjusted the tie several times, trying to mimic what he had seen in movies. When he was finally done, he looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized himself. The street boy had disappeared, replaced by someone who looked like he belonged in this world of wealth and elegance. Luke touched his reflection, disbelieving. Who are you? Is this how I should be if I had a home, a shower, and clean clothes? He whispered to his image. A knock on the door broke him out of his reverie. A middle-aged man dressed in an impeccable uniform entered the room. Young Luke, Mr. Matthew requests your presence. The guests have started to arrive. Luke's heart raced. The reality of the situation finally hit him. He was really about to attend a high society party. I'm ready. Do you think I look presentable? He said, his voice shaking slightly. The staff member looked him up and down, adjusting Luke's tie slightly. You look perfect, young sir. Now if you'll please follow me. Luke followed the man through the mansion's corridors, the sound of voices and soft music growing louder as they neared the main ballroom. Each step seemed to take him further away from his familiar world and deeper into this new universe of luxury and mystery. Stopping before a large double door, the staff member turned to Luke. Ready, young sir? Luke swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment. He nodded silently, his heart pounding in his chest. The doors opened, revealing a ballroom filled with elegantly dressed people, all of them seeming to turn and look at him. There he is. My dear guests, allow me to introduce our special guest for tonight. Mr. Matthew's voice rang out above the murmur of the party. Luke took a hesitant step into the hall, feeling dozens of eyes on him. Whatever this night held in store for him, there was no turning back now. With one last trembling sigh, he stepped into his new role, ready to face the unknown. Luke advanced shyly across the hall, feeling like a fish out of water amidst the sea of gala dresses and expensive suits. The guests, initially curious, soon began exchanging disdainful glances and barely disguised whispers. A middle-aged woman, dripping with jewelry, wrinkled her nose as she passed by him, as if she could smell the street still impregnated on his skin, despite the bath and new clothes. What an absurd idea of Matthew's, bringing a street boy to a party like this. What is he thinking? She muttered to her companion, loudly enough for Luke to hear. Luke lowered his eyes, feeling his face burn with shame. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the ornate walls or hide behind the enormous velvet curtains. Maybe this was a mistake. I don't belong here, he thought, swallowing hard. Mr. Matthew appeared at his side, placing a hand on his shoulder with excessive force, as if fearing the boy might flee at any moment. His smile was wide, but his eyes had a calculating glint that Luke didn't notice. Come, my boy, let me introduce you to some of my esteemed friends. I'm sure they're eager to meet you, said the millionaire, guiding him through the hall. They approached a group of businessmen, all with expressions of boredom and superiority etched on their well-groomed faces. One of them, the tallest in the group, raised an eyebrow upon seeing Luke. So this is your charity project, Matthew? I confess I was expecting something more. Impressive. He looked so ordinary, he asked with a mocking smile. Luke felt the grip on his shoulder tighten, but Mr. Matthew kept the smile on his face. Oh, don't underestimate our young friend here. I'm sure he'll surprise us tonight, won't you, Luke? The millionaire asked. The boy opened his mouth to answer, but the words stuck in his throat. He merely nodded, feeling smaller and smaller under the men's judgmental gazes. The men laughed, a cold and humorless sound that made Luke want to shrink even further. One of the men spoke, his tone condescending. Luke stuttered, uncertain of how to respond. It's my first time, sir. I've never seen anything like this before. This elicited more laughter from the group. Of course not. I imagine your parties on the streets are quite different. What do? Share a piece of cardboard? Said another man, rolling his eyes. An elegant woman approached, her high heels clicking on the marble floor. She examined Luke from head to toe, as if appraising an object at an auction. Tell me, boy, what's it like living on the streets? It must be so. Quaint. Do you make friends with the rats? She spoke, her voice too sweet to be sincere. Luke stuttered again, uncertain how to respond. It's hard, ma'am, but you learn to get by, and no, we don't make friends with rats, Luke replied nervously. The woman laughed, a shrill and unpleasant sound. How adorable. So authentic. Matthew, you really found a pearl here. He's almost like an exotic little pet, she said, making the millionaire smile, his eyes shining with a satisfaction that Luke misinterpreted as pride. I told you he'd be the highlight of the night, didn't I? Luke here is full of surprises. More guests gathered around, drawn by the novelty. Luke found himself surrounded by a sea of curious and disdainful faces. Questions began raining down on him, each one more invasive and cruel than the last. Have you ever robbed anyone? Asked a middle-aged man, his breath reeking of expensive alcohol. No, sir. I've never stolen anything in my life, Luke responded, feeling cornered. Were your parents addicts? A woman questioned, her eyes gleaming with morbid curiosity. Luke felt a pang in his chest thinking about his parents. I don't know, ma'am. My mother, I got lost from her one day and didn't know how to find my way back home. I haven't seen my parents in a long time. Maybe if I saw them, I wouldn't even recognize them. How long do you think it'll take for you to end up back on the streets? Another guest asked, laughing as if he had told a hilarious joke. Luke tried to answer as best he could, his voice trembling more and more. He looked to Mr. Matthew, hoping for some kind of intervention, but the millionaire seemed to be savoring every moment of his discomfort. I don't, Luke began, but was cut off by a particularly loud guffaw. Look at him. He can't even talk properly. Matthew, where did you find this little gem? In some junkyard? A corpulent man exclaimed, his face red from laughing so hard. Mr. Matthew smiled, a dangerous glint in his eyes. On the streets, of course. Where else would we find such an interesting specimen? Luke here is a true diamond in the rough, he replied, while Luke shrank further and further. Suddenly, a woman approached, holding a champagne flute. Tell me, boy, have you ever had champagne? Or are you only used to gutter water? She slurred. Luke felt tears forming in his eyes, but he fought to hold them back. He didn't want to give these people the pleasure of seeing him cry. His thoughts flew to the streets he had left behind. And maybe it was better there. At least there nobody pretended to be my friend before hurting me, he thought bitterly. Mr. Matthew, sensing that Luke was about to break down, decided to intervene, not out of compassion, but to prolong the spectacle. Come now, my dear guests, give our young friend a bit of space. The night is still young, and I'm sure Luke has much more to show us. he spoke, his voice rising above the murmurs. With that, he guided Luke away from the group, but the boy knew it was only a temporary pause. The night had barely begun, and he already felt exhausted and humiliated. As he walked beside Mr. Matthew, Luke couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into, and if he would ever escape this cruel and glittering world that seemed determined to shatter him. Mr. Matthew led Luke to the center of the hall, where a small makeshift stage had been set up. The millionaire climbed the steps nimbly, pulling the boy with him. Luke felt his heart race as he realized that all eyes at the party were now fixed on him. Mr. Matthew raised a champagne flute, silencing the crowd with a gesture. "My dear friends, as you all must have noticed, we have a very special guest tonight. Luke, please come here," he began, his voice resonating through the hall. The boy stepped forward, trembling from head to toe. He could feel the weight of the gazes upon him, some curious, others disdainful, but all equally intimidating. Mr. Matthew placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that seemed friendly but which Luke felt like a shackle. "Luke has a fascinating story to share with us, a story of overcoming, of struggling on the streets of our city." "Luke, why don't you tell everyone how we met?" said Mr. Matthew, making the boy swallow hard, his throat suddenly tight. He looked at the crowd, searching for a friendly face, but finding only expressions of cruel expectation. I was on the street," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "looking for food when—" A shrill laugh cut through the air, followed by others. Luke stopped, feeling his face burn with shame. He saw a man at the back of the hall whisper something to a woman, both of them laughing behind their champagne flutes. "Come now, Luke. Don't be shy. Tell us more about your life on the streets. It must be so picturesque," encouraged Mr. Matthew, his smile not reaching his eyes. Luke took a deep breath, trying to gather courage. "It's not easy. Sometimes we don't eat for days. We sleep wherever we can, always afraid of," he continued, his voice gaining a little more strength. Another wave of laughter interrupted him. Luke felt tears forming in his eyes, but he fought to hold them back. It was then that he noticed something strange. At several points around the hall, men with cameras were filming. His eyes widened in shock and confusion. Why are you filming me?" he asked, turning to Mr. Matthew. The millionaire laughed, a cold sound that made Luke shrink. "Oh, don't worry about that, my boy. We're just documenting this special moment. After all, it's not every day we have such a unique guest," he replied with a strange smile. Luke felt a knot form in his stomach. Something was wrong, very wrong. He looked again at the crowd, noticing now the cruel smiles, the amused looks at his expense. It wasn't a charity party, he realized with growing horror. It was a spectacle, and he was the main attraction. "Go on, Luke. Our guests are eager to hear more. Tell us about your family. Where are your parents?" insisted Mr. Matthew, his tone now firmer. The mention of his parents made Luke's heart ache. He lowered his eyes, struggling against the painful memories that surfaced. I don't know," he admitted, his voice choked. "It's been a long time since I've seen them. I got lost and—" More laughter, now accompanied by cruel comments that Luke could hear clearly. "They probably abandoned him. Who would want a child like that?" someone said. Luke felt his legs weaken. He wanted to run, to escape those cruel gazes and the relentless cameras. But where would he go? This mansion was a completely foreign world to him, a golden labyrinth with no apparent exit. "Come now, Luke. Don't disappoint our guests. Tell us more. What do you do to survive on the streets? Surely you must have some interesting stories to share." Mr. Matthew's voice cut through his thoughts. The millionaire's tone made it clear that he expected something shocking, something that could further entertain his sensation-hungry guests. Luke felt cornered, pressured to expose parts of his life he would rather forget. I do what I can. Sometimes I help people carry groceries or clean cars. Other times, I struggle to survive by finding files of food," he said, his voice trembling. He stopped, remembering the nights when he had to scavenge through trash cans for food scraps. The thought made him feel nauseous, especially now surrounded by so much luxury and waste. "What do you mean by finding food, Luke?" pressed Mr. Matthew, his eyes glinting with a cruelty that the boy, in his innocence, could not fully comprehend. "Don't leave us in suspense." Luke looked at the faces around him, at the cameras capturing every moment of his humiliation. He wanted to scream, cry, run away, but he was paralyzed, trapped in this nightmare of bright lights and cruel laughter. Matthew, perceiving Luke's growing discomfort and the eager interest of his guests, decided to raise the stakes even further. He raised his hands, silencing the crowd with a theatrical gesture. His eyes gleamed with an idea that promised more entertainment at the boy's expense. "My dear friends, how about we make this night even more interesting? I propose a little game," he announced, his voice reverberating through the hall. The guests murmured with enthusiasm, eager to see what the next act of this cruel circus would be. Luke, still trembling on the makeshift stage, looked at Mr. Matthew with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Luke here," the millionaire continued, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, "has shown us he knows how to get by on the streets. But does he have what it takes to survive in our world?" he asked the audience. He paused dramatically, savoring everyone's attention. "I propose that our young friend serve drinks to the guests. For each drink served correctly, he will earn, let's say, 100 reais. What do you think?" he asked, and the crowd applauded and laughed, delighted with the idea. Luke felt his stomach churn. 100 reais was more money than he saw in weeks. He could feed himself for a good while, but the idea of being a sideshow for these people filled him with dread. "What do you say, Luke? Ready to earn some honest money?" Mr. Matthew asked, his smile not reaching his cold eyes. Luke swallowed hard, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. I've never served drinks before," he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. Laughter echoed through the hall. "Ah, but of course not. I imagine you're more accustomed to drinking than serving, aren't you, boy?" exclaimed a woman, her voice dripping with disdain, making the boy shrink. "I'm just a child. How could I have already tasted alcohol? Why are these people so prejudiced and evil?" he thought. Mr. Matthew raised a hand, silencing the laughter. "Come on, Luke. It's your chance to learn a new skill. Who knows? It might come in handy in the future," he argued, and without waiting for a response, the millionaire guided Luke to the bar, where a waiter handed the boy an apron and a tray. Luke's hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the tray. "Remember, smile and be polite. My guests expect the best service," said Mr. Matthew, his voice low and threatening. With one last warning glance, Mr. Matthew walked away, leaving Luke alone to face the crowd of thirsty and cruel guests. The boy took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. "You can do this. It's just serving drinks. It can't be that hard, can it?" he whispered to himself. But as he advanced among the guests, Luke realized this task would be much more challenging than he had imagined. The orders were complex, filled with names of drinks he had never heard of. Dry martini, whiskey on the rocks, gin and tonic with a twist of lemon. Each order seemed more complicated than the last. "Hey boy, I want a Manhattan and don't mess it up," called a burly man, swirling an empty glass. Luke ran back to the bar, repeating the order to the bartender as if it were a mantra. When he returned with the drink, his hands were shaking so hard he almost spilled it all. "Careful, kid. You want to ruin my 10,000 real suit?" the man yelled, snatching the glass from Luke's tray. The hours dragged on and Luke felt every muscle in his body ache. He ran back and forth, trying to fulfill all the orders, always under the watchful eye of Mr. Matthew and the cameras that kept rolling. "Faster, Luke, I'm dying of thirst here," someone shouted. "This isn't the drink I ordered. Can't you do anything right?" someone else complained. With each mistake, each spilled drop, Luke felt his dream of earning some money slipping through his fingers. The guests seemed more interested in seeing him fail than in actually receiving their drinks. Exhausted and frayed, Luke tried to keep his balance as he navigated the crowded hall with a tray full of champagne flutes. His eyes stung with fatigue and his legs trembled under the weight of responsibility and the constant fear of making a mistake. The buzz of the party seemed to grow louder by the minute, the voices of the guests blending into a deafening sound that made his head spin. He took a deep breath, trying to focus on the task at hand, repeating to himself, "Slow and steady, one step at a time." Suddenly, an animated guest gesticulating wildly bumped into Luke, causing him to lose his balance. He tried to recover, but it was too late. The tray slipped from his trembling hands, and the world seemed to slow down as the champagne flutes flew through the air. The sound of shattering glass against the marble floor echoed through the hall, momentarily silencing all conversations. Luke stood paralyzed, staring in horror at the scene of destruction at his feet. "You incompetent brat! Look what you've done! This dress costs more than you'd earn in a lifetime!" screamed a woman whose silk gown had been splashed with champagne. The laughter and malicious comments were not long in coming, echoing throughout the hall. Luke felt his face burn with shame, wishing he could disappear at that very moment. He quickly bent down, trying to pick up the shards of glass with his bare hands, cutting them in the process, but desperate to fix his mistake. "Stop that at once! What do you think you're doing, you fool? Do you want to cut your hands and ruin my Persian rug with your filthy blood?" Mr. Matthews' thunderous voice sounded above the commotion. The millionaire strode forward, his face a mask of restrained fury. He grabbed Luke by the arm, pulling him up with force. Luke trembled under Mr. Matthews' furious gaze, feeling tears forming in his eyes. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. It was an accident." His voice was barely a whisper, almost inaudible amidst the growing murmur of the guests. Mr. Matthew gripped Luke's arm even tighter, leaning in to speak directly into his ear. His voice was low and menacing, meant for the boy alone to hear. "Listen up, kid. You've got one more chance, one more slip-up, one single spill, and I'll toss you back into the gutter you came from. Understood?" he asked, and Luke nodded frantically, swallowing the lump forming in his throat. "Mr. Matthew released him with a shove, turning back to the guests with a forced smile. "My apologies for the inconvenience, my dear friends. It seems our young companion still has much to learn about proper service. But don't worry, I'm sure he'll learn quickly. Won't you, Luke?" The boy nodded silently, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone in the room could hear it. A servant appeared with cleaning supplies, handing them to Luke without a word. Under the curious and disdainful looks of the guests, the boy began cleaning up the mess he'd made. As he scrubbed the floor, kneeling among shattered glass and puddles of champagne, Luke could hear the guests' cruel remarks. "Well, look at that. He's finally doing something he's good at. I bet he feels right at home like that on his knees," one man said, eliciting laughter laced with scorn. Luke tried to ignore the hurtful words, focusing on the task at hand. He scrubbed vigorously, determined not to give them any more reason to complain. In his mind, he clung to the hope that if he did everything right from now on, maybe he could still earn some money for food. "I just need to hang in there a little longer. Just a little bit more and this will all be over," he thought to himself. Little did he know, his torment was far from over. As he finished wiping up the last puddle of champagne, Luke heard the sound of shattering glass once again. He looked up to see an elegantly dressed woman gazing down at him with a malicious smile. At her feet lay a shattered wineglass, its dark red contents pooling on the pristine floor. "Oops, it seems I'm just as clumsy as you, darling. You don't mind cleaning this up for me, do you? After all, that's what you're here for, isn't it?" she said, feigning innocence. Luke felt his heart sink. He knew he had no choice and that the woman had done it on purpose. So, slowly, he dragged himself over to the new spill, keenly aware of the stares and laughter around him. The woman stepped back to allow him closer, but not before deliberately stepping into the puddle of wine, spreading it even further. "Oh, how careless of me. I suppose you'll have to clean my sandals too, sweetie." "I can't have wine stains all over the floor now, can I?" she exclaimed, her voice dripping with false concern. Luke swallowed hard, a wave of humiliation washing over him. He looked to Mr. Matthew, hoping for some intervention, but the millionaire merely watched with a satisfied smile, as if enjoying a particularly pleasing spectacle. With trembling hands, Luke began cleaning up the new spill, conscious of the cameras still capturing every moment of his degradation. He could feel the tears burning in his eyes, but refused to let them fall. He wouldn't give these people the satisfaction of seeing him cry. "That's it, darling, don't forget to get all the corners. And when you're done there, you can start on my shoes. They're Louboutins, you know. Probably cost more than you've ever seen in your life," the woman continued, her honeyed voice dripping with cruelty. Luke worked in silence, each motion a struggle against the overwhelming urge to flee, to escape this gilded nightmare of luxury and cruelty. But where would he go? What would he do? The streets seemed like paradise compared to this golden hell, but he knew returning empty-handed meant more nights of hunger and despair. As he scrubbed the floor and the woman's shoes, Luke wondered how his life had come to this. How had a simple party invitation turned into this endless torment? He thought of his mother. How horrified she would be if she could see him now. "Mama, where are you? Why didn't you keep looking for me?" he thought, swallowing a sob. The ballroom still buzzed with conversations and laughter, but now Luke noticed looks of boredom on some faces. Apparently his humiliation was no longer such a novel thrill. He grabbed his tray, determined to get through the rest of his duties without further incident, hoping that maybe, if he was quiet and discreet enough, people would simply ignore him. Can I make it through the rest of the night unnoticed? Maybe if I'm quick and silent, they'll forget about me, Luke thought, his eyes scanning the room for empty glasses to collect. As he cautiously moved between groups of guests, Luke noticed two men in a secluded corner of the hall. They spoke in low voices, casting furtive glances in his direction. Something in their expressions made Luke slow down, his curiosity momentarily overriding his desire to go unnoticed. He silently drew closer, pretending to organize some glasses on his tray while straining his ears to catch their conversation. "I told you, didn't I? The kid won't last until the end of the party. I bet 200 that he breaks down in tears before midnight," one of the men whispered, a malicious smile playing on his lips. The other man shook his head, his eyes never leaving Luke. "I don't know. The boy seems to have more fiber than he looks. 300 saying he lasts until the end, but ends up stealing something before leaving. Those street types can't resist when they see so much luxury," he said, making Luke's stomach churn at the men's words. They were betting on his suffering, on his potential downfall. The idea that his misery was not only entertainment, but also the object of wagers, made a wave of nausea hit him. He quickly backed away, nearly dropping his tray in the process. "They think I'm going to steal. After everything I've been through, they still think I'm a thief," Luke thought, indignation and hurt bubbling in his chest. Determined to prove them wrong, Luke redoubled his efforts. He moved through the hall with renewed efficiency, collecting empty glasses and distributing drinks with a precision that surprised even himself. Every movement was calculated, every forced smile a mask of professionalism. He would not give these men or anyone else at the party the satisfaction of seeing him break. The minutes ticked by, and Luke felt every muscle in his body screaming in protest. Fatigue weighed on him like a lead blanket, but he refused to give in. Occasionally, he caught snippets of conversations about himself, some speculating on how long he would last, others making cruel jokes about his origins and appearance. "I won't let them win. I won't cry, I won't quit, and I definitely won't steal anything," Luke repeated to himself like a mantra. As the night wore on, Luke noticed the two men who had made the bet watching him with growing interest. He could feel their gazes tracking his every move, like vultures waiting for their prey to succumb. The pressure was almost unbearable, but Luke clung to his determination like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood. In a moment of relative calm, Luke allowed himself a momentary pause by a window. He looked out at the dark garden, imagining how easy it would be to simply open the window and flee into the night. Freedom was so close, yet so unattainable. I could just leave, but where would I go? And what would happen to the money I earned? Would Mr. Matthew still pay me? He thought, his fingers grazing the cool glass. The sound of a shattering glass jolted him back to reality. Luke whipped around, fearing it was another deliberate accident from some cruel guest. To his surprise, he saw it was merely an elderly man who had accidentally spilled his drink. Without hesitation, Luke hurried to help, grabbing a towel from a nearby waiter. As he cleaned up the spill, Luke heard the old man mutter something that caught him off guard. "I'm sorry, my young man. You don't deserve any of this." "You're very kind," Luke whispered, his voice trembling with pent-up emotion. The moment passed quickly and Luke returned to his work. But something had shifted. The small act of kindness had ignited a spark of hope in his chest. Perhaps, he thought, not everyone at this party was a monster. Perhaps there was a reason to keep fighting, to prove his worth not to the cruel gamblers, but to himself and those few who still saw his humanity. The hall began to buzz with a new wave of excitement as Mr. Matthew ascended the makeshift stage. He raised his hands, silencing the crowd with a theatrical gesture, his smile glinting under the twinkling lights of the crystal chandeliers. Luke, who was collecting empty glasses in a corner, felt a chill run down his spine. Something in the millionaire's gaze, a mixture of cruel amusement and anticipation, made his stomach churn. "My dear guests, the moment we've all been waiting for has arrived. It's time for our young Luke to prove once and for all that he deserves to be among us," Mr. Matthew announced, his voice reverberating through the hall. He paused dramatically, savoring the attention of all present. "Luke, please come up here." With trembling legs, Luke approached the stage. Each step seemed to bring him closer to an uncertain and potentially humiliating fate. He could feel the guests' stares burning into his skin, a mixture of morbid curiosity and barely concealed disdain. What will it be now? What more could they want from me? He thought, swallowing hard. Mr. Matthew placed an arm around Luke's shoulders, a gesture that seemed friendly but which the boy felt like a shackle. "Luke here has been entertaining us all night with his peculiar talent for service. But now, my friends, we'll give him the chance to truly earn his place among us, and of course a considerable sum of money," the millionaire continued, eliciting laughter from the audience. The eyes of Luke widened when he heard the mention of money. Despite all the torment he had endured, the prospect of earning enough to change his life, even temporarily, was tempting. Maybe it was all worth it, he thought, a glimmer of hope igniting in his chest. Mr. Matthew made a sweeping gesture toward an area of the hall that had been cleared. Luke noticed with growing apprehension that a strange structure had been set up there. It looked like some kind of narrow, elevated, and unstable platform. "Your task, my young friend, is to cross this platform carrying a tray full of champagne glasses. If you manage to reach the other side without spilling a single drop, you will win 10,000 reais, explained Mr. Matthew, his smile now wider than ever. A murmur of excitement ran through the crowd. 10,000 reais was an amount that Luke could barely imagine. It was more money than he had ever seen in his life, enough to completely change his situation. But the task seemed almost impossible. The platform was narrow, barely the width of his feet, and rose at least a meter off the ground. "And if I fall?" Luke asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Matthew laughed, a cold sound that made Luke flinch. "Well, in that case, besides not getting the money, you'll provide us with quite a show, won't you? Who knows? Maybe we'll even have to call an ambulance." That would certainly make the night memorable. He turned to the audience, raising his eyebrows suggestively. Luke felt the blood chill in his veins. It wasn't just a matter of humiliation now. His physical safety was at stake. He looked at the platform, then at the eager faces of the guests, and finally at Mr. Matthew, who watched him with an almost predatory expectation. I don't know if I can do this," Luke murmured, feeling the weight of fear and uncertainty. "Oh, but you can, my young friend," insisted Mr. Matthew, his tone falsely encouraging. "Think of the money. Think of how your life could change. All you have to do is cross that little platform. It's nothing compared to the difficulties you face on the streets every day, is it?" Mr. Matthew's words, though cruel in their manipulation, struck something deep within Luke. It was true. He had faced far greater dangers on the streets. Hunger, cold, violence. Compared to that, crossing an elevated platform seemed almost trivial. With a trembling sigh, Luke nodded. "Okay, I'll try," he said, gathering all the courage he could muster. A waiter approached, handing Luke a heavy tray filled to the brim with champagne glasses. The boy took it with trembling hands, surprised by the weight. He approached the platform, feeling his heart beating so hard it seemed to want to leap from his chest. "You can do it. Think of the money. Think of how it can change everything," he told himself, trying to ignore the whispers and giggles from the audience. With one last look at Mr. Matthew, who now watched with a smile of anticipation, Luke took the first step onto the platform. The structure swayed slightly under his weight, causing the glasses to clink dangerously. He froze, trying to regain his balance, aware that the slightest wrong move could result in disaster. Slowly, with tiny, calculated steps, Luke began his journey across the platform. Every movement was a struggle against gravity and his own fear. He could hear the guests holding their breath, some openly rooting for his failure, others watching in tense silence. Sweat poured down his face, blurring his vision, but he dared not take his eyes off the path ahead. Halfway through, disaster struck. A sudden gust of wind caused the platform to sway more violently. Luke felt his balance weaken, the tray in his hands tipping precariously. In that moment, time seemed to slow. He could see the champagne spraying from the glasses, tiny droplets rising into the air ready to fall. With a supreme effort, he twisted, using his entire body to stabilize the tray. By some miracle, the glasses steadied, not a single drop spilled. A collective sigh of disappointment and surprise rippled through the crowd. Luke, shaking from head to toe, forced himself to continue. Every step is agony, every inch is a battle, but I need the money. I have to have determination. This is a matter of my survival, Luke thought, pressing on with hesitant steps. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Luke reached the end of the platform. With wobbly legs, he stepped down, placing the tray on a nearby table. The silence in the hall was deafening. Then, to his surprise, a round of applause erupted. Not applause of admiration or respect, but rather the kind of ovation given to a particularly impressive circus trick. Mr. Matthew approached, his face a mask of false admiration. "Impressive, my young friend. Who would have thought a street boy would have such balance and grace? Perhaps we should consider you for the circus. What do you say, my friends?" he exclaimed, clapping Luke on the back with unnecessary force. The laughter that followed cut Luke more deeply than any previous humiliation. Even in this moment of triumph, they could not let him have an instant of dignity. He turned to Mr. Matthew, exhaustion and hurt evident in his eyes. "The money, sir. You said I would win 10,000 reais," he said, his voice hoarse with fatigue. Mr. Matthew's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. "Ah, yes, the money. Well, my young friend, you certainly proved your worth tonight. But you see, the real prize was the experience, don't you think? I'm not sure it was worth the full amount I offered. The chance to be among us, to learn how the truly civilized live. That is priceless, is it not?" Luke felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. All the hope, all the determination that had sustained him through that ordeal collapsed in an instant. He looked around at the smiling and cruel faces of the guests, at the cameras that were still filming every moment of his humiliation, and finally back at Mr. Matthew, who watched him with barely concealed satisfaction. But you promised." "I did everything you asked. Luke stammered, feeling the tears he had held back all night threaten to overflow. Mr. Matthew cut him off with a disdainful gesture. "Come now, Luke, don't be ungrateful. Think of all the food you've eaten, the fine clothes you're wearing. That's surely worth more than a few pennies, don't you think? Now, why don't you get back to work? The night's not over yet, and I'm sure our guests would love a few more drinks." With those words, Mr. Matthew walked away, leaving Luke, who had returned to the ballroom completely alone, surrounded only by laughter and looks of feigned pity. The boy stood there paralyzed, feeling as if the ground had disappeared from under his feet. The entire night of torment, all the humiliation and effort, it had all been for nothing. How could I have been so foolish? How could I have believed they would actually give me a chance? Luke thought, tears finally streaming down his cheeks. At that moment, surrounded by the luxury and cruelty of high society, Luke had never felt so alone and lost. The night, which had already seemed endless, stretched out before him like a dark, bottomless abyss. Luke, feeling the overwhelming weight of humiliation and despair, quietly slipped away from the main ballroom. His footsteps echoed through the luxurious corridors of the mansion as he desperately searched for refuge, a place where he could escape the cruel gazes and mocking laughter. Finally, he spotted an ornate door with the sign "Restroom," and without hesitation, pushed it open and entered, quickly closing it behind him. The contrast between the sudden silence of the bathroom and the buzz of the party was almost deafening. Leaning back against the closed door, Luke finally allowed the tears he had held back for so long to flow freely. His sobs echoed in the marble-clad space, the sound of his broken heart reverberating off the walls. He slowly slid down to the floor, hugging his knees to his chest as if trying to shield himself from the world outside. Why am I here? What did I do to deserve all this? He murmured between sobs. Looking up, Luke saw himself reflected in the huge mirror that covered one of the walls. The image staring back at him was almost unrecognizable. The elegant suit now crumpled and stained, his face red and puffy from crying, his eyes that had once shone with hope, now dull and defeated. He staggered to his feet and approached the mirror, touching his reflection with trembling fingers. "Who are you? What happened to that boy who dreamed of better days?" he whispered to his image. Anger began to bubble up inside him, mixing with the despair and humiliation. Walking over to the marble sink, Luke turned on the golden faucet and let the cold water run over his hand, cut by the shards of glass. The intense cold seemed to bring him back to reality, clearing his thoughts for a moment. He raised his eyes, meeting his reflection's gaze again, this time with a bit more clarity. "You can't stay here forever, but where will you go?" he said to himself. The idea of running away, of simply opening the window and disappearing into the night, was tempting. Luke looked at the ornate bathroom window, imagining how easy it would be to escape through there, leaving this nightmare of luxury and cruelty behind. He could go back to the streets, to the life he knew, however harsh it might be. At least there, he thought bitterly, no one pretended to be his friend before stabbing him in the back. But then, like a bucket of cold water, reality hit him. The money. He still hadn't received anything for his work tonight. All the abuse, all the humiliation he had endured, it would all be in vain if he left now empty-handed. "I can't give up now. I need that money. I need something good to come out of this painful night," he muttered, gripping the edges of the sink so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Luke closed his eyes, taking deep breaths several times, trying to calm his racing heart and organize his thoughts. He thought of all the nights he had spent hungry, of all the days wandering the streets aimlessly. He thought of the possibility that, with some money, he might be able to get a place to sleep, food for a few days, maybe even a chance to look for his mother. "You're stronger than this. You've survived the streets. You can survive these cruel rich people for a few more hours," he told himself, opening his eyes and meeting his reflection's gaze with renewed determination. With still trembling hands, Luke straightened his suit as best he could, washed his face to try to conceal the signs of crying, and combed his hair with his fingers. Looking at himself one last time in the mirror, he tried to force a smile, but the result was more a grimace of determination. "Just a little longer, get the money, and it will all have been worth it," he promised himself. Taking one last deep breath, Luke turned towards the door. His hand hovered over the doorknob for a moment, hesitation making his stomach churn. On the other side of that door was a world of luxury and cruelty, a world that had done everything to break his spirit, but it was also the world that, however twisted it might be, offered a chance for change. "You can do this. Show them they can't break you," he murmured to himself, mustering all the courage he had left. With a determined motion, Luke opened the door and stepped out of the bathroom, returning to the hallway that led to the main hall. The sound of the party reached him, reminding him of what awaited. But this time, instead of fear, Luke felt a fierce determination growing inside him. He would not let those people see him cry again. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him broken. With firm steps, he walked back into the hall, ready to face whatever the rest of the night had in store for him. "Let's end this," he thought, clenching his fists. "And let them be prepared, because this street kid won't give up so easily." Luke entered the hall with a fierce determination shining in his eyes. The hum of the party momentarily diminished as the guests noticed his return, curious and disdainful glances following each of his steps. He walked straight up to Mr. Matthew, who was surrounded by a group of admirers, laughing and drinking champagne, as if the humiliation of a child were the height of entertainment. Luke took a deep breath, gathering all his courage, and spoke in a loud and clear voice. "Mr. Matthew, I want to propose a new challenge." The millionaire turned, surprise and amusement dancing in his eyes. Well, well, it seems our young friend still has some fire left in him. "What did you have in mind, Luke?" he asked, making Luke swallow hard, but he kept his voice firm. "I want to go back on the platform, this time with double the glasses and double the prize money." A murmur of excitement rippled through the hall. "Mr. Matthew raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by the boy's audacity. "An interesting proposal, my young man. But what makes you think you deserve such an opportunity?" he asked, surprised. "Because this time, I want you to show the money up front. I want to see the 20,000 reais in hand before I get up on that platform," Luke said, his voice gaining strength. Mr. Matthew's smile widened, a mixture of admiration and malice in his gaze. "I see you've learned some lessons tonight, Luke. Very well, I accept your proposal," he said. As Mr. Matthew gave orders for the money to be brought and the platform prepared, Luke felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. It was the elderly man who had shown kindness earlier. "My boy, don't do this. It's not worth the risk," he said, his voice laden with concern. Luke looked into the man's eyes, seeing the genuine concern there. For a moment he hesitated. "But I need that money, sir. It's my only chance. I need to survive, and that money will secure that for me," he said. However, before the man could respond, 2 burly security guards appeared, pushing him away from Luke. "Step aside, sir. The show is about to begin," one of them grunted. Luke's heart ached to see the only adult who had shown him kindness treated that way, but he couldn't afford to hesitate now. He focused his attention on the platform, which now seemed even higher and more unstable than before. "Mr. Matthew returned, carrying a thick wad of cash. "Here it is, Luke. The full amount you asked for, all yours if you can cross the platform with double the glasses without spilling a single drop," he said, and Luke nodded, his eyes fixed on the money. "Show it to everyone, please. I want everyone to be a witness." With an amused smile, Mr. Matthew raised the wad of cash, waving it to the excited crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, attention! This is the prize for our young tightrope walker. If he succeeds..." A waiter approached, carrying a heavy tray with double the number of champagne flutes from before. Luke took it, feeling the ominous weight in his arms. He approached the platform, his heart pounding so loudly it seemed like everyone in the hall could hear it. "You can do this. Think of the money. Think of how it can change everything," he told himself. With one last look at the eager crowd, Luke took the first step onto the platform. The silence in the hall was palpable, broken only by the occasional clink of the glasses. Slowly, with careful, measured steps, he began his journey. Each step was a battle against gravity and his own fear. Luke could feel the sweat trickling down his back, his hands trembling slightly under the weight of the tray, but he refused to give up. He continued forward inch by inch, focusing only on the next step. When he reached the halfway point of the platform, he felt momentarily relieved. "I'm doing it. I can do this," he thought, allowing himself a small smile. That's when he felt it. A subtle tremor, almost imperceptible at first, but quickly turning into a more pronounced sway. The platform began to sway dangerously under his feet. Luke froze, his entire body tense, struggling to maintain his balance. "What's happening?" he thought in panic, his eyes scanning the crowd for the source of the movement. That's when he saw it. One of the guests, half hidden behind others, was discreetly pushing the base of the platform with his foot. Panic threatened to engulf him. The glasses clinked perilously, the champagne threatening to spill at any moment. Luke knew he was one wrong move away from falling, from losing everything he had fought for tonight. "I can't give up now. Not after coming this far," he thought desperately. With all the willpower he could muster, Luke forced himself to remain still, precariously balancing in the center of the swaying platform. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath, all eyes fixed on the boy who was struggling not only against gravity, but against the deliberate cruelty of his tormentors. In that moment, suspended between heaven and earth, between hope and despair, Luke faced his greatest challenge. The fate of his night, and perhaps his future, hung literally by a thread. Luke remained motionless for a moment that seemed an eternity, his muscles trembling with the effort of maintaining balance on the swaying platform. The silence in the hall was deafening, broken only by the occasional tinkling of champagne flutes on his tray. He could feel the weight of the guests' gazes, a mixture of cruel expectation and morbid fascination. Slowly, with a fierce determination shining in his eyes, Luke began to move again, each step carefully calculated. "You can do it," he murmured to himself, his voice barely audible above the sound of blood pounding in his ears. "Think of the money. Think of the freedom it will bring. As he advanced, Luke could feel the platform continuing to sway subtly. The guest pushing it seemed determined to see him fail. Sweat trickled down the boy's face, blurring his vision, but he dared not take his hands off the tray to wipe it. Each step was a battle, not just against gravity, but against the human cruelty that seemed to permeate the air of the lavish hall. Suddenly his foot slipped. It was just a small slip, but in that precarious situation it was enough to completely unbalance him. Luke felt his body tilt sideways, the tray in his hands threatening to tip over. The world seemed to slow down as he struggled desperately to regain his balance. The flutes clinked violently, the champagne threatening to spill at any moment. The crowd let out a collective gasp, some guests even rising from their seats, unable to look away from the drama unfolding before them. Luke could hear muffled exclamations and even some nervous laughter. "This is when he falls," someone muttered. "What a shame he was almost there," said another, the tone of false sympathy barely disguising cruel satisfaction. At the very last second, when all seemed lost, Luke managed to plant his foot firmly on the platform. His body swayed dangerously, the tray jangling noisily in his hands. For a moment it looked like the flutes would go flying into the air, spilling their precious contents and costing Luke his chance at redemption. Time seemed to have stopped, each second stretching into an eternity of uncertainty and fear. "Not now. I've come too far to fail now," he thought desperately, his arms trembling with the effort of keeping the tray balanced. With a supreme effort, Luke managed to stabilize the tray. The flutes calmed down, not a drop spilled. A collective sigh of relief, and perhaps disappointment from some, echoed through the hall. Luke remained motionless for a few seconds, his chest heaving, trying to calm his racing heart. He could feel the sweat trickling down his back, soaking through the thin shirt of his borrowed suit. Slowly he raised his eyes, looking towards the end of the platform. He was so close now, just a few more steps and he would have made it. The sight of the wad of cash in Mr. Matthews' hands renewed his determination. Those bills represented more than just money. They were the promise of a better life, of regular meals, of a roof over his head for a few days, perhaps even the chance to find his lost family. With a deep breath, Luke braced himself to take the next step. He could feel every muscle in his body protesting, exhausted by the continuous effort and strain. But he refused to give up. Not after having come this far, not after enduring so much humiliation and pain. It was at that moment that he heard it. A voice cut through the tense silence of the hall, a voice laden with emotion and desperation. "Son, Luke, is that you?" a man shouted, his voice echoing off the walls of the lavish hall, reverberating like thunder amidst the stunned silence of the guests. Luke froze, his foot suspended in mid-air. The word reverberated in his mind, triggering a torrent of long-suppressed emotions and memories. He turned slowly, his eyes searching for the source of that desperate cry, the tray in his hands momentarily forgotten. Luke remained motionless on the platform, suspended not just physically, but emotionally between two worlds. On one side, the challenge he was determined to complete, the chance to win the money that could change his life. On the other, the possibility of recovering a long-lost connection, of finally having answers to the questions that had haunted him for years. The tension in the hall was palpable. All eyes were fixed on Luke, waiting to see what he would do next. The boy's fate, which already seemed to hang by a thread, was now more uncertain than ever. Each passing second seemed to stretch into eternity, Luke's future swaying as precariously as his body on the unstable platform. The silence in the hall was deafening as everyone watched Luke, still precariously balanced on the platform. The boy looked at the tray in his hands, at the end of the platform where the money awaited him, and then at the man who had just entered, claiming to be his father. With a trembling sigh, Luke made his decision. Slowly, taking care not to spill a single drop, he turned and walked back to the beginning of the platform. Upon arriving there, he handed the tray to a stunned waiter and, with wobbly legs, descended the steps. As soon as his feet touched the floor of the hall, Luke felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do next. His gaze met that of the man who had called him son, and he felt a strange mixture of fear and hope growing in his chest. The man, Samuel Harris, took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Luke's. When he spoke, his voice was laden with emotion. "Luke, my son, where have you been, my boy? After all these years, I never lost hope of finding you. Every day without you was an agony, every night a torment. I searched in every corner, turned every stone, followed every clue, no matter how tenuous. I remember the day you were born, so small, so perfect. Your first smile, your first steps, your first word, Daddy. Every moment is etched into my memory as if it were yesterday. And then, in the blink of an eye, you were gone, vanished without a trace." Samuel clenched his fists, the pain evident in every line of his face. "I moved heaven and earth to find you. I hired detectives, offered rewards, begged God every night. Every child on the street, every lost boy, I saw your face. The guilt consumed me. I should have protected you better. I should have been there." Luke felt tears begin to stream down his face. Fragments of memories, a warm embrace, a deep laugh, the scent of a familiar cologne, flooded his mind. Your mother. She never fully recovered, but she never lost hope. "He'll come back to us," she'd say every day. "Our boy will find his way home. And now, after all this time." Samuel took another step towards Luke, lessening the distance between them. "Look at you. A young man now. How many birthdays did we miss? How many Christmases? How many precious moments we can never get back, but none of that matters now. You're here. You're alive." His voice broke on the last word, and he had to pause to compose himself. Luke felt his heart pounding erratically, each word awakening more long-buried emotions. "I never stopped loving you and searching for you, Luke. Not for a second. Every decision I made, every action I took, was with you in mind. I built an empire not out of greed or power, but to have the resources to keep looking for you, to be able to give you everything you deserve when I finally found you." Samuel extended his hand, almost touching Luke's face, but hesitated at the last moment. "You must have been through so much. I can't even imagine the hardships, the fears, the loneliness. But I want you to know that no matter what happened, no matter where you've been or what you've done, I love you. Unconditionally." Luke felt his legs trembling, barely able to remain standing in the face of the overwhelming emotions flooding him. Part of him wanted to run into this man's arms, bury his face in his chest, and let years of pain and loneliness be washed away by his tears. Another part was terrified, fearing that this was all just a cruel dream from which he would wake at any moment. "I know you must be confused, scared perhaps," Samuel continued, his voice soft and soothing. "I know I can't just show up after all these years and expect everything to go back to normal. But I want you to know that I'm here now. And if you give me a chance, I promise I will never leave you again. You'll never have to face the world alone again." Samuel finally touched Luke's face, gently wiping away a tear with his thumb. "You're my son, Luke, my precious boy. And if you want, we can be a family again. Your mother is waiting at home, praying that this day has finally come. We can go home, Luke, together." The entire hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Luke's reaction. The boy remained still for a moment, his eyes locked with Samuel's, searching. He didn't even know what for. Recognition, truth, love? And then, like a dam bursting, all the emotions Luke had repressed for years came flooding out. With a choked sob, he flung himself into Samuel's arms, burying his face in the chest of the man claiming to be his father. "Dad," he mumbled, his voice muffled by tears and the fabric of Samuel's suit. Samuel enveloped Luke in a tight embrace, his own tears finally falling freely. "Yes, my son, I'm here, and I'll never let you go again." The hall erupted in a mixture of applause, sobs, and exclamations of surprise. But for Luke and Samuel in that moment, the world had shrunk to just the two of them, father and son reunited after years of separation, beginning the long process of healing and reconnection. Samuel held Luke in his arms, reluctant to let go after so many years apart. Yet gradually the sounds of the hall began to penetrate the emotional bubble surrounding them. Murmurs and whispers spread through the crowd, and fragments of conversation reached Samuel's ears. "Can you believe it? The boy we were humiliating. Samuel Harris's son. Who would have thought? Poor child. What we did." Samuel drew back slightly from Luke, keeping his hands on his son's shoulders, and looked around the hall with an expression of confusion and growing anger. Humiliating? What do they mean by that, Luke? Luke lowered his eyes, shame and fear still evident on his face. They made me do things, Dad. Serve drinks, walk on a high platform. They laughed at me. It was horrible. Samuel's expression hardened, his eyes sweeping the crowd of guests who now seemed to want to melt into the walls. He turned to Mr. Matthew, who was trying to discreetly edge away. "You," Samuel said, his voice low and dangerous. "Explain yourself now." Mr. Matthew stuttered, his face pale with fear. "Mr. Harris, we didn't know. It was just an innocent prank. We had no idea who he was." Samuel raised his hand, silencing him. He turned to the guests, his voice rising so that all could hear. "Innocent prank? Is that what you call deliberate cruelty against a child? Let me tell you something about innocence and the lack thereof." He paused, taking a deep breath, his hand still resting protectively on Luke's shoulder. "When I lost my son so many years ago, I thought nothing could be worse. The pain, the guilt, the despair, it was like a black hole consuming everything in my life. But today I find him again, only to discover that he has been subjected to more suffering, more humiliation, by the very people I considered friends and business partners." Samuel looked directly into the eyes of several guests, noting how they shrank under his gaze. "You who have everything, money, power, influence, chose to use it to debase someone who had nothing, someone who was alone, hungry, desperate. Instead of extending a hand to help, you turned his suffering into entertainment. What kind of people do that? What kind of society have we created where this is considered acceptable?" His voice shook with contained emotion, but he continued, "Have you ever stopped to think about what drives a child to the streets? Have you ever imagined the fear, the loneliness, the daily struggle for survival? No, of course not. To you it was just a game, a distraction from your privileged, empty lives. But for children like Luke, it's the cruel reality they face every day." He turned to Luke, his eyes softening momentarily. "My son, you showed more courage and dignity tonight than all these people combined in their entire lives. I'm so proud of you, so grateful to have found you." Facing the crowd again, Samuel continued, his voice gaining strength. "Empathy is not just a nice word to use in charity speeches. It's an action, a choice we make every day. It's seeing the other as a human being, with dreams, fears, and intrinsic worth. Something clearly lacking in all of you here tonight. How could you look into the eyes of a hungry, frightened child and see only a source of amusement?" He pointed to Mr. Matthew, who looked as if he wanted to disappear into the floor. "You organized this. You turned a child's suffering into a spectacle for your bored, wealthy friends. How do you look at yourself in the mirror? How do you sleep at night? Do you have children, Matthew? Imagine if it were one of them in that situation. Imagine if it were your child being humiliated for the entertainment of strangers." "Mr. Matthew tried to speak, but Samuel cut him off, his voice cutting like steel. "I don't want to hear your excuses. There is no justification for what was done here tonight, and know that, from this moment on, all business between us is terminated. Every contract, every partnership, consider them null and void. You built your empire on the exploitation of the weak, but that ends today." A murmur of shock rippled through the hall. Samuel Harris was known for his business empire, and many there depended on their connections with him. "This applies to all of you," Samuel continued, his gaze sweeping the room. "Anyone who participated in this atrocity, who laughed, who bet, who encouraged, you are no longer welcome in my business or in my life. Your actions tonight have shown your true character, and it's not something I wish to be associated with." He paused, letting his words sink in. The silence in the hall was palpable, heavy with the realization of the consequences of their actions. "You may have your money, your mansions, your luxury cars, but tonight you showed that you lack something far more valuable, humanity. And without it you are poorer than my son ever was, even on the streets. What kind of legacy are you leaving? What example are you setting for your children?" Samuel turned to Luke, who looked at him with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Son, was there anyone here who was kind to you? Anyone who tried to help?" Luke hesitated for a moment, then pointed to the elderly man who had recognized their resemblance. "Him, Dad. He was kind to me." Samuel nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Sir, please, come here. You are the only person in this room who has shown a shred of decency tonight. I would like to speak with you later, if possible. Your action will not be forgotten." The elderly man approached timidly, nodding in agreement, tears of relief and gratitude in his eyes. Turning one last time to the crowd, Samuel continued his speech, his voice laden with emotion and determination. "I hope this evening serves as a lesson for all of you, that the next time you see someone in need, you remember this moment. Remember how you treated my son, and do the opposite. Show compassion, lend a hand, be human. Think of the children who are on the streets at this very moment. Children who are hungry, cold, alone and afraid. Children like Luke was until a few hours ago. What will you do the next time you see one of them? Will you turn your face? Will you turn them into a joke to impress your friends? Or will you finally use your resources, your influence to make a difference?" Samuel paused, looking into the eyes of each person in the room. "You have the power to change lives, to save lives. But instead you chose to use that power to hurt, to humiliate. What a waste, what a shame." He embraced Luke again, kissing the top of his head. "Let's go home, son. Your mother is waiting, and we have a lot of lost time to make up for. You will never have to go through something like this again, I promise." As they headed for the exit, Samuel stopped briefly, looking one last time at the silent, ashamed crowd. "Reflect on your actions tonight, on the kind of people you have become, and then decide what kind of people you want to be from here on out. Because the true test of character is not how we treat our equals, but how we treat those we consider inferior." He turned to Mr. Matthew, who seemed to have aged years in a matter of minutes. "And Mr. Matthew, expect to hear from my lawyers. This is not over. I will ensure that you and everyone involved in this prank are held accountable for your actions." With those words, Samuel guided Luke out of the hall, leaving behind a group of wealthy and powerful people, but utterly humiliated and ashamed. The silence that followed their departure was deafening, each person there confronted with the cruel truth of their actions and the reality of their consequences. As father and son left the mansion, Luke looked up at Samuel, his eyes full of admiration and an unasked question. "Dad," he said softly, "did you really mean all that? About protecting me and never leaving me again?" Samuel stopped, kneeling down to be at Luke's eye level. "Every word, my son, every word. From now on, you will never be alone again. We will face everything together, as a family." Minutes later, Samuel's car glided smoothly through the streets of the city, leaving behind the affluent neighborhood where Mr. Matthew's mansion was located. Luke watched out the window, his heart beating rapidly, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation growing in his chest. The city lights passed by in blurs, reflecting on the glass and the boy's watery eyes. Samuel, seated beside him, kept a protective hand on his son's shoulder, as if fearing he might disappear again if he let go. "We're almost there, son," Samuel said softly, noticing Luke's rising tension. "Your mother. She doesn't know we're coming. It's going to be an amazing surprise for her." Luke swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. What if she doesn't recognize me? What if I'm not what she expects? I've changed so much, Dad." Samuel gently squeezed Luke's shoulder. "Son, a mother always recognizes her child. No matter how much time passes, no matter how much you change, a mother's love is eternal," the father replied. The car finally came to a stop in front of an imposing gate. Samuel entered a code, and the gate silently swung open, revealing a long driveway flanked by neatly trimmed trees. As they progressed, an impressive mansion came into view, its lights giving it a welcoming air despite its size. "She's home," Samuel murmured, his voice trembling with emotion. "Let's give her the surprise of her life." Samuel turned off the engine, turning to Luke with a gentle smile. "Ready to see your mum, son?" Luke nodded, unable to form words. His hands were shaking as he opened the car door. Father and son walked side by side to the front door. Samuel took a deep breath before inserting the key into the lock. The door opened, revealing an elegant entrance hall. "Ava," Samuel called, his voice echoing through the house. "Darling, I'm home, and I have a surprise for you." Footsteps were heard upstairs, and soon a feminine voice answered, "Samuel, you're home early. What's going on?" Ava appeared at the top of the staircase, her eyes immediately locking onto Samuel. Then her gaze fell on Luke and the world seemed to stop. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hands flying to cover her mouth. "It can't be. Luke." For a moment, time itself seemed to freeze. Ava stood motionless at the top of the stairs, her eyes wide and fixed on Luke, as if fearing he would disappear if she blinked. Luke, for his part, felt his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. "Mom," he managed to whisper, his voice choked with emotion. With a sob catching in her throat, Ava ran down the stairs, nearly tripping in her haste to reach her son. She flung herself into Luke's arms, enveloping him in an embrace so tight it seemed she wanted to meld with him. "My son," she cried, her tears wetting Luke's shoulder. "My boy, you've come back to me. You've really come back." Luke returned the embrace with equal intensity, letting his own tears flow freely. "Mom," he sobbed, "I missed you so much. I'm so sorry for getting lost." Ava stepped back slightly, holding Luke's face between her hands, her eyes roaming every inch of his features as if she wanted to memorize every detail. "No, my love," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "You have nothing to apologize for. None of this was your fault. The important thing is that you're here now. You've come back to us." Samuel joined the embrace, wrapping his wife and son in his arms. For several minutes they stood like that, a reunited family, their tears mingling, years of pain and longing washed away by the love and relief of their reunion. Finally, Ava pulled back, still holding Luke's hands as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. "Come," she said, guiding him to the living room. "You must be starving. Let's eat something and you can tell us everything." They sat down, Luke in the middle with his parents on either side. Ava couldn't take her eyes off her son, constantly touching him as if to assure herself that he was real. "Luke," she began, her voice soft but intense. "My son, I need you to know, we never ever gave up on you. Not for a single day, not for a single moment." She paused, taking a deep breath to compose herself. "When you went missing, it was like the world had ended. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think. Every second without you was agony." Luke lowered his eyes, guilt weighing on him. "Mom, Ava raised her hand, gently silencing him. "Let me finish, my love. It's important that you hear this," she continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "We turned this city upside down looking for you. Every alley, every street, every abandoned building. We hired detectives, offered rewards, begged God every night. But no one seemed to be able to find you, and the longer it went on, the harder it became." Her hands trembled slightly as she held Luke's. "There were moments of despair, it's true. Moments when the world seemed too dark, the pain too unbearable. But we never, not for a second, lost hope." Ava smiled through her tears, caressing Luke's face. "Because I knew deep in my heart that you were alive, that one day you would come back to us. And now you're here, my miracle, my precious boy." She took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving Luke's. "I want you to know, Luke, that no matter what happened, no matter where you were or what you had to do to survive, we love you. Unconditionally, completely, eternally." Ava held Luke's face between her hands, her eyes shining with love and determination. "From now on, my son, you will never be away from us again. We will give you all the love, all the support, every opportunity we can." She paused, a soft smile forming on her lips. "And together, as a family, we will create new memories. We will make up for every missed birthday, every Christmas we spent apart. We will fill your life with so much love and happiness that the bad memories will fade like mist in the sun." Luke felt his heart overflowing with emotion. He looked at his mother, at his father, seeing in them all the love and acceptance he had dreamed of during his years on the streets. I don't know what to say," he murmured, his voice choked. "I've dreamed of this moment so many times, but I never thought it would actually happen." Ava pulled him into another embrace, kissing the top of his head. "You don't have to say anything, my love. You're home now. That's all that matters." Samuel joined the embrace, wrapping his wife and son in his strong arms. "We're a family again. he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "and nothing ever again will tear us apart." The night wore on, and the family stayed together, sharing stories, tears, and promises for the future. Luke gradually felt more at ease, his laughter echoing through the house for the first time in years. Eva and Samuel listened intently as Luke recounted his years on the streets, their hearts breaking with every detail of the suffering their son had endured. But there were also moments of lightness, stories of unexpected kindness and friendships forged in the most unlikely circumstances. As the night wore on, exhaustion began to weigh on Luke. Eva noticed his heavy eyes and smiled tenderly. "You must be exhausted, my love. How about we show you your room?" They climbed the stairs, Luke between his parents, each holding one of his hands. As they opened the bedroom door, Luke was rendered speechless at seeing that there was indeed a room for him there. The room was exactly as he remembered it, preserved like a sanctuary during all the years of his absence. "We never changed anything," Samuel explained softly. "We always kept hope that one day you would come back home." Luke slowly walked around the room, touching his old toys, looking at the photos on the walls. It was like going back in time, to a period of innocence and safety that he thought he had lost forever. He turned to his parents, fresh tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, "for never giving up on me, for loving me so much." Eva and Samuel embraced him once more, their own tears mingling with his. "Always, my son," said Eva. "Our love for you is eternal." As they prepared for the first night together as a reunited family, there was a palpable sense of new beginnings in the air. The wounds were still there. The scars of years of separation wouldn't fade overnight. But there was also hope, love, and the promise of a bright future together. Luke lay on his childhood bed, the comfort and safety he had longed for so long finally within reach. As sleep enveloped him, he knew that no matter what the future held, he would never be alone again. He was home, loved and protected, and that, he realized, was all that truly mattered. In the weeks following the incident at Mr. Matthew's mansion, a media storm formed. The story of the humiliated street kid who turned out to be the lost son of billionaire Samuel Harris spread like wildfire, consuming reputations and fortunes in its path. Mr. Matthew, sitting in his luxurious office, watched helplessly as his empire crumbled around him. His company's stocks plummeted, business partners cut ties, and clients fled en masse. "How could this happen so fast?" he muttered to himself, running his now grey-stressed hands through his hair. It was just a harmless prank. How did it all go so wrong? The phones wouldn't stop ringing, each call bringing more bad news. Cancelled contracts, investors withdrawing their support, the relentless press in their pursuit of more sordid details. Mr. Matthew felt the ground vanishing from beneath his feet, the world he had so carefully built unraveling before his eyes. "Mr. Matthew," his secretary entered, her face pale with concern. "The lawyers are here. They say it's urgent." He nodded mechanically, knowing that what would follow wouldn't be good. The lawyers entered, their grave expressions confirming his worst fears. "Mr. Matthew," the eldest of them began, "there's no easy way to say this. The company is bankrupt. The creditors are demanding immediate payment and, well, there aren't enough funds." Mr. Matthew felt as if he had been punched in the gut. "Bankrupt?" he repeated incredulously. "How is that possible? We were one of the country's biggest companies just a few weeks ago." The lawyer sighed, placing a stack of documents on the desk. "The combination of the bad publicity, the lawsuits, and the massive withdrawal of investors. It was the perfect storm, Mr. Matthew. And I'm afraid it doesn't end there. Your personal assets will also be affected." The words hit Mr. Matthew like a thunderbolt. His personal assets. That meant... "The mansion?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The lawyer nodded grimly. "I'm sorry, but yes. The mansion, the cars, the vacation properties, everything will have to be liquidated to pay off the debts." Mr. Matthew sank into his chair, the world spinning around him. How had it come to this? Just weeks ago, he was one of the city's most powerful and respected men. Now he was about to lose everything. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, meetings with creditors, and the humiliation of watching his belongings being inventoried and appraised. "Mr. Matthew observed, a sense of unreality enveloping him, as strangers rummaged through his home, assigning values to objects that to him were priceless. "How much for this painting?" an appraiser asked, pointing to a painting Mr. Matthew had bought to celebrate his first million. "It doesn't matter," he answered bitterly. "Nothing matters anymore." News of his downfall spread quickly. Former friends and associates avoided him on the street, turning their faces or pretending not to recognize him. The same people who had laughed and applauded at his party now treated him like a pariah, fearful of being associated with him. Finally, the day came when Mr. Matthew had to leave his mansion for the last time. He stopped at the entrance, looking at the imposing structure that had been his home and symbol of his success for so many years. With a heavy sigh, he turned his back on his old life, carrying only a suitcase with a few personal belongings. "Where do I go from here?" he thought, feeling lost and disoriented for the first time in decades. What's left for someone who has lost everything? The city streets, once his playground, now seemed hostile and threatening. Mr. Matthew wandered aimlessly, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. No money, no friends, no place to call home. He had become what he once despised, a homeless man invisible to the eyes of the society that once idolized him. As night fell, Mr. Matthew found himself in a park, the same park where he used to take his morning runs in designer clothes. Now he sat on a bench, his suitcase his only companion, contemplating the cruel irony of fate. "Is this how it ends?" he muttered to himself, looking up at the starry sky. "All my work, all my dreams reduced to this?" As darkness enveloped him, Mr. Matthew felt for the first time the crushing weight of loneliness and despair he had inflicted on so many others. And as the city lights glowed in the distance, he wondered if he would ever find redemption, or if this was the final price for his cruelty and arrogance. 3 months after Luke's reunion with his family, he woke up in the middle of the night, sweating and gasping. Another nightmare about his days on the streets. Sitting up in bed, Luke looked around his luxurious bedroom, the contrast with his memories making his heart ache. "There has to be something I can do, something to help the kids who are still out there," he murmured to himself, running his hands through his hair. The next morning, over breakfast, Luke barely touched his food, his mind still filled with the ideas that had kept him awake the rest of the night. Samuel noticed his son's distraction. "Is everything okay, Luke?" "You seem distant," he asked, concern evident in his voice. Luke took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Dad, Mum, I've been thinking. What if we used our resources to help other street children?" he asked. Ava and Samuel exchanged surprised but interested looks. "Go on, son," Ava encouraged. "I was lucky," Luke explained, his words coming out quickly now. "You found me, but what about the other kids? What if we could create a place where they could find help, education, a future?" Samuel nodded slowly, a smile forming on his face. "A foundation," he said, "an organization dedicated to helping street children." "Luke, that's a brilliant idea," said his father. Luke's eyes lit up with hope. "You think so? Can we really do it?" Ava stood up and hugged her son. "Of course we can, my love. And we will." In the weeks that followed, the Harris household turned into a planning hub. The dining room table was covered in papers, blueprints, and budgets. Luke spent hours researching other charities, learning about the challenges faced by street children and the best ways to help them. One night, as they were reviewing the plans, Samuel noticed the tiredness in Luke's eyes. "Son, you're pouring so much into this. You don't have to carry the whole weight alone," Samuel said. Luke smiled weakly. "I know, Dad. But every minute we spend planning is another minute a child spends on the streets. I can't help but think about that." Ava placed a hand on Luke's shoulder. "And that's why we're going to do this right. So we can help as many children as possible, for as long as possible," his mother added. As the plans solidified, the family began searching for a location for the foundation. After visiting several buildings, they finally found the perfect place, an old abandoned school in the city center. "It's perfect," Luke said, his eyes shining as he walked through the dusty hallways. "We can turn the classrooms into dorms, use the cafeteria, the gym." Samuel nodded, already visualizing the possibilities. "It will need a lot of work, but we have the resources. We can make this happen, he said. With the location chosen, the next step was to assemble a team. Luke insisted on sitting in on every interview, determined to find people who truly cared. During a particularly intense interview with a social worker, Luke asked, "Why do you want to work with street children?" The man hesitated for a moment before answering, "Because I was one. And I know that with the right help, those kids can have a bright future," he replied. Luke exchanged a meaningful look with his parents. "You're hired," he said, a broad smile on his face. As the opening date neared, Luke's anxiety grew. One night, Samuel found him sitting on the porch, gazing at the stars. "Nervous?" Samuel asked, taking a seat beside his son. Luke nodded. "What if it's not enough? What if we fail?" Samuel put an arm around Luke's shoulders. "Then we'll learn from our mistakes and try again. The important thing is that we're trying to make a difference," his father replied. Finally, the big day arrived. The Harris family gathered for breakfast, excitement palpable in the air. "Ready to change the world?" Ava asked, kissing Luke's forehead. The boy smiled, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. "One step at a time, right?" When they arrived at the foundation building, a crowd had already formed. Journalists, local officials, and most importantly, dozens of children and teenagers from shelters around the area. Samuel took the stage for the opening speech. "A few months ago, our family received a miracle. Our son, lost for so long, came back to us. But with that joy came a painful realization. There are countless children out there who aren't so lucky. That's why we're here today." He paused, his eyes finding Luke's in the crowd. The Harris Foundation for Street Children isn't just about charity. It's about real, lasting change. We're going to offer shelter, education, job training, and above all, hope, because every child deserves a bright future. Applause rippled through the crowd. Luke felt a lump in his throat, moved by the sight of so many people gathered for a cause he knew so intimately. Samuel motioned for Luke to join him on stage. "And now, I'd like you to hear from my son, Luke." His journey inspired all of this. Luke approached the microphone, his heart pounding. He looked out at the crowd, seeing hopeful faces, some marred by the same pain and struggle he knew so well. "I've been where many of you are," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "On the streets, hungry, scared. I thought I was alone in the world. But today, I'm here to tell you that you're not alone. We're here for you." Luke's words touched hearts. Tears could be seen in the eyes of many in the audience, including some of the shelter kids. "The Harris Foundation isn't just a building or a name," Luke continued, gaining confidence. "It's a promise that we're not going to give up on you, just like my parents never gave up on me." After the speeches, the doors of the foundation were officially opened. Luke, Samuel, and Ava guided the guests through the interior, showing off the refurbished classrooms, cozy dorms, recreation areas, and offices where social workers and psychologists would be available. "Here," Luke explained to a group of teenagers, "we'll have computer classes, English, and other skills that will help you get jobs in the future." One of the boys, not much younger than Luke, raised his hand shyly. "But what if we're not good enough? What if we fail?" he asked nervously. Luke smiled gently, recognizing the fear in the boy's eyes. "Then we'll try again, and again, as many times as it takes. No one here will be left behind." As the day progressed, Luke found himself immersed in countless conversations, listening to stories that echoed his own experience. Every word reinforced his determination to make a difference. "You know," he said to a girl who had shared her story of life on the streets, "one day you'll be on the other side, helping others as we're helping you now." The girl looked at him with a mixture of surprise and hope. "You really think so?" she asked, curious, and Luke nodded firmly. "I'm sure of it, because if I made it, you can too." As the sun began to set, marking the end of the inauguration day, the Harris family gathered again. They were exhausted, but their faces shone with the satisfaction of a job well begun. "This is just the beginning," said Samuel, embracing Luke and Ava. "We have a long road ahead of us, but together we can make a difference." Ava kissed Luke's cheek, her eyes shining with pride. "You were incredible today, my love. You touched so many hearts," she said, and Luke looked at the foundation building, feeling a wave of emotion sweep through him. "Thank you for making this possible, for believing in me and this idea." In the months that followed, the Harris Foundation became a beacon of hope for the city's street children. Luke was there almost every day, helping with classes, talking to the children, sharing his own story to inspire hope. One day, while helping a group of children with their math lesson, Luke heard a commotion in the hallway. Upon investigating, he found a new boy, clearly scared and distrustful, being brought in by one of the social workers. "Hey," Luke said softly, kneeling down to be at eye level with the boy. "I'm Luke. What's your name?" The boy hesitated before mumbling, "Miguel." He seemed nervous. Luke smiled gently. "Welcome, Miguel. I know it might seem scary now, but I promise you're safe here." As he guided Miguel through the building, showing him where he would sleep and have his meals, Luke felt a wave of gratitude and purpose. This was why they had created the foundation, so that no child would have to go through what he went through. That night, back at the Harris mansion, the family gathered in the living room. Fatigue was evident, but there was a positive energy in the air, a renewed sense of purpose. "You know," Luke said, breaking the comfortable silence, "today made me think about how things could have been different if there had been a place like this when I was on the streets." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "That's true. But now, thanks to you, other children will have that chance," his father said, and Ava leaned in, taking Luke's hands in hers. "You've turned your pain into something beautiful, my son. I'm so proud of you." Luke felt tears forming in his eyes. "I just want to make a difference, to help those who are going through what I went through," the boy said, emotional. "And you are," Samuel assured him. "One day at a time, one child at a time. We're changing lives together." As the night wore on, the Harris family continued planning for the future. They discussed expansions to the foundation, new initiatives, partnerships with other organizations. Luke knew the road ahead would be long and sometimes difficult, but looking at his parents, at the love and support surrounding him, he knew that together they could overcome any obstacle. The Harris Foundation for Street Children was more than just a building or an organization. It was a symbol of hope, a promise of a better future for those that society often forgets. And for Luke, it was the realization of a dream born on the streets, nurtured by the love of a reunited family, and transformed into a force for good in the world. A few weeks later, at the Harris Foundation, Luke was in the main lobby chatting animatedly with a group of newly arrived children. The morning sun streamed through the large windows, illuminating the welcoming space that had become a haven for so many young people in need. Suddenly, a commotion at the entrance caught his attention. Luke turned and his heart nearly stopped as he recognized the bedraggled figure who had just entered. It was Mr. Matthew, the man who had been the catalyst for the entire change in his life. "It can't be," Luke muttered to himself, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. What is he doing here? Mr. Matthew was a shadow of the powerful, arrogant man Luke had known. His clothes were dirty and torn, his beard unkempt, and his eyes, once full of disdain, now carried a mixture of shame and desperation. He hesitated in the entryway, clearly uncomfortable and out of place. Luke took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He knew this moment would be a test, not just for himself, but for everything the foundation stood for. "Be kind to one another," he had told the youth countless times. Now it was his turn to practice what he preached. With slow but determined steps, Luke approached Mr. Matthew. The older man looked up, recognition and fear crossing his tired face. "Luke," he mumbled, his voice hoarse and broken, I didn't know where else to go. I've lost everything." Luke felt a pang of compassion, despite everything that had happened. "Mr. Matthew," he said softly, "what happened to you?" The older man broke down, the words pouring out in a torrent of remorse and despair. He told of financial ruin, of losing his mansion, his friends, everything he had once deemed important. After what I did to you, I lost it all and ended up living on the streets, an ironic fate to teach me to see my mistakes. I understand if you turn me away," he concluded, tears streaming down his hollowed cheeks. "After everything I did to you, Luke remained silent for a moment, processing everything he had heard. Part of him wanted to feel satisfaction at Mr. Matthew's downfall, but another part, the part that had suffered on the streets and knew how cruel the world could be, felt only compassion. "Nobody deserves to go through that, Mr. Matthew," Luke finally said, his voice firm but gentle. "Not even you. This foundation exists to help people in need, and now you are one of them." Mr. Matthew looked up, incredulous. "You? You're offering to help me? After everything I did? Why? Why aren't you humiliating me, kicking me out of here?" Luke smiled softly, remembering all the lessons he had learned on his journey. "Because it wouldn't change anything. Because the cycle of cruelty only ends when someone chooses to be kind. And because everyone deserves a second chance." At that moment, Samuel and Ava, Luke's parents, entered the lobby. They stopped, surprised to see the scene before them. Luke saw them and motioned for them to approach. "Mom, Dad," Luke said as they joined him, "this is Mr. Matthew. He needs our help now." Samuel and Ava exchanged glances, recognizing the name of the man who had caused their son so much suffering. But seeing the compassion in Luke's eyes, they understood what was happening. Ava was the first to speak, her voice soft but firm. "Mr. Matthew, welcome to the Harris Foundation. Here, everyone has a chance to start over." Samuel nodded, placing a hand on Luke's shoulder. "Our son has taught us the true meaning of forgiveness and compassion. If he believes you deserve a second chance, then we believe it too." Luke looked at his parents with gratitude and pride. Together, they were not only changing lives but hearts as well. As they guided Mr. Matthew into the foundation, Luke felt a profound sense of peace and purpose. This was the true mission of the Harris Foundation, to offer hope and redemption, no matter how unlikely it seemed. Later that day, as the sun began to set, Luke found his parents on the foundation's veranda, watching the children play in the yard. "You were right," Luke said, joining them. "One day at a time, one person at a time, that's how we make a difference." Ava hugged her son, tears of pride in her eyes. "You've taught us so much, Luke. Your strength, your compassion. You're a miracle." Samuel nodded, placing a hand on Luke's shoulder. "We spent years searching for you, son, and now I see that the universe had a greater plan. Your journey wasn't just to come back to us, but to help so many others find their way home." Luke felt his heart overflow with love and gratitude. He looked out at the horizon, at the future full of possibilities that stretched before them. "We're a family again," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But now our family is so much bigger than we ever imagined." As the sky painted itself in shades of orange and pink, the Harris family stood together, their silhouettes cast against the setting sun. They had faced pain, separation, and unimaginable challenges, but emerged stronger, more compassionate, and more united than ever before. The Harris Foundation was more than a legacy. It was a testament to the power of love, perseverance, and an unshakable belief in human kindness. And for Luke, it was living proof that even in the darkest of nights there is always hope for a new dawn. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing exciting stories almost every day. Don't miss the next surprising narrative that is about to appear on your screen. We are immensely grateful to have you here with us. Now you can click on the links appearing on the screen right now. We have a special selection just for you, filled with valuable stories and guaranteed entertainment. See you there.